You're listening to Release Your Resistance with Bex Beltran, episode 58. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. I've got something special for you for today's episode. It's an interview with my friend and mentor, Ariane, who is a financial coach. But what makes her story so interesting is that she's technically retired and living on the road with her husband and cats, getting to know our amazing national parks in the United States. During this episode, she lets me ask her all sorts of personal questions about money, specifically how she spends her money and how she set herself up to quit her corporate career and start a retired lifestyle in her 40s. We did have some connectivity issues during our interview since she is on the road, and even though I feel 100% fine, as I re-listened, I noticed that some points in our interview sound like I have a sore throat. So I apologize that it might be tough to hear and understand some parts of this interview, but the information is so good, I am recommending that you listen with headphones and pay close attention. Despite the sound quality, you will not regret it. Let's go to the interview. Hi, Ariane. How's it going?
Hi, Bex. Thank you for having me. I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm so excited to talk to you because you specialize in an area that a lot of people have a lot of questions or maybe some resistance and doubt about. So I can't wait to talk with you about what you do and how you got to where you are. Instead of me talking about you, if you don't mind, would you mind just kind of like giving us your introduction?
Sure. Thank you. I am a financial coach, as you have mentioned in the intro. I also live in an RV full time with my husband and my two cats, and we travel the U.S. I left my corporate job back in 2016 to pursue a number of passion projects, and that was a planned and an intentional step. So at the time, these projects were about volunteer work and helping out various charities that I like to support, and I also wanted to travel and visit as many national parks and national monuments as possible. At that time, financial coaching, which is what I'm doing now, in addition to everything that I just mentioned, was not really consciously on my radar. But, when you give up a secure job intentionally and you tell people about that, that brings up a lot of questions. So these conversations then lead to talking about finances and financial aspects of how you create this kind of freedom. And then people ask for your advice on their own situation. And so, the fact that I'm a financial coach today kind of evolved from chatting to friends and strangers about my life. Yeah.
So now I'm very curious, when the people would meet you and you would kind of just in a casual way talk about it, and you said your lifestyle kind of brought up a lot of questions. I am just dying to hear, like, what questions did they ask you? What did they want to know?
Yes. I mean, I started traveling and left my job when I was in my 40s, right?
Okay.
So I'm not typical retirement age. And when you meet people out in your travels, they are often, retired, and so it's quite clear that they're like this older couple that you retired and then decided to do the RV life. And then you're in your 40s, that people often go like, well, do you work from your RV, or what do you do? And a lot of us people that are not fully retired yet do seasonal jobs or other things, to support themselves while they're on the road. This question comes up immediately. It's like, how do you support yourself? What do you do? That then leads to how you prepared for this life, or what had to happen or fall into place. Finances comes up pretty early in these conversations. And it's usually the people on the road that are that kind of know that there's options, but the people that are still in their corporate jobs, they often don't see a way out. They're like, oh no, I'm stuck in this. I could never do this. because X,
Right.
Y, and Z, and they don't realize that they have all these choices and options. So, yeah, I help people see those. I mean, you don't even have to act on them, but I think there's a lot of value into discovering that you have choices and options.
Yes. Even just that knowledge, I think, can really help people feel less trapped or less like this is my only option, even just knowing that it's possible. So I want to put you on the spot a little bit because as people met you and continue to meet you and see that you are living the lifestyle that you have intentionally created for yourself, do you believe other people can do it too? Or did you get lucky or were you a special unicorn?
I'm certainly not a special unicorn. I do recognize that I had a lot of privilege. I mean, I had a well-paying job that enabled me to save a lot of money. So living below your means is a lot easier if you have a six-figure job than if you have low five figures. I totally realize that. I know there's people today that are living paycheck to paycheck and have not all that many options. But if you're honest, most of us that are like in the mid five figures to low six figures, we will find ways to live below our means if you just align our spending with your values really well. I mean, there's like a stop gap if you're like on a very low income and have to support a big family. There's only a limited amount of things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people often are worried about coaches telling them to skip the lattes when they don't even have lattes in their budget. That's not the kind of people I'm talking about. And I realize and I fully acknowledge that some people really have it very hard. There's also a lot of people that are like in a medium range salary that spend a lot of their money unconsciously on things that don't really add value to their life. And if they just like would go through those items and see if that really is something that they value, they could create a lot more options and flexibility for themselves by just being a little bit more conscious with their spending.
Yeah, I've seen that in my own life so much so. And I definitely think you had some influence on that too. So I thank you for that.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that. Thanks.
So I love that you're really narrowing down kind of like who you work with and who this is possible for or who it might be a little bit tougher for. And one thing I noticed when I was looking at your website, tidyupyourfinances.com, I saw that you identify yourself as working with financially single women. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it because I heard you say earlier you are in an RV with your husband, so you are not single. I am not single, but I kind of identify with the phrase financially single. So tell me what you meant when you wrote that.
Yes, my husband and I have been married for over 5 years now, but I still consider myself financially single because we have separate finances. And there's many ways to organize finances as a couple. I feel a lot of women don't realize that they can still remain financially single even when they're in a relationship. And that sometimes is the healthier option, especially if you have a partner that may not be on the same page as you are, like with what they value, how they value their spending, for example. Yeah. So, or some couples have a natural saver and a natural spender, and the saver part of the relationship feels they're not getting anywhere because the spender part sidetracks them all the time. So staying financially single, even in a relationship, can be a good solution to take out the stress or the arguments about money in a relationship. The term financially single, I use that because there's a lot of women that are single and then they can decide about their finances themselves. But even if you're in a relationship, you don't necessarily have to like commingle everything, and you can like pursue your own goals with your finances. Actually, in my previous relationships, I've always stayed financially single.
Yes, and I love that you are sharing that. I also, like I said, I consider myself financially single for the most part, in some ways too. And I agree with you. I think it really takes out a lot of the stress or discussions or arguments maybe that some people might have with their partners. And it really puts the responsibility on me to handle what I care about. We do some things jointly, but I think I like this for my relationship. And it sounds like you like it for your relationship too. And I hope that people who hadn't considered before, but are maybe now considering it, maybe see it as one of those options to give them a little bit more flexibility or autonomy maybe over their own finances.
Exactly, yes. I mean, again, we have joint expenses
Hmm.
in our marriage, and we have a joint account for those, but that still doesn't mean we join our finances completely.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to realize they have options if they choose to use them.
Yeah.
It's not the right solution for everybody, but it may be for some.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your story as far as how, like, now I'm sure there's people who are like, okay, hold on. She started an RV lifestyle and left a good paying job in her 40s. What? So, can you give us a little bit, maybe the highlights of the backstory to that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I love talking about that. And as you know, I'm a listener of your podcast and a big
Yes.
fan. And
Thank you.
I know that in one of your early episodes, you were talking about financial independence and the
Mhm.
financial, independent community or movement or however you want to call it.
Right. Yes.
And yeah, this is something that I discovered back in 2010. Well, to be perfectly honest, even like before that, it's something I had like thought about and dreamt about right when I graduated college in the 90s. But it was so out of reach back then that I kind of lost track of it and rediscovered the subject in 2010. So right in the middle of the Great Recession. So based on some of the subjects I rediscovered through the financial independence movement, I was able, to save enough money to give myself the option of resigning from my job.
Mm.
It was not something that I had planned at the time because I loved my job. And I was one of those people who would always say, even if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would still, go to work because I just love my job so much. And then, things changed and I had all those passion projects that my job was getting in the way of. And I wish I had more time to do other things. And yeah, well, I always was a natural saver. So that was something that came easy to me. But the whole, investing my money to find that freedom and to finance a lifestyle of freedom, that's something I learned thanks to several sources that I found through that movement. That's really what enabled me to get into a position where I could resign from my job.
Okay, so my mind is going a lot of different directions now. So one thing I
Mm-hmm.
want to ask about is are those sources that you learned and applied on yourself, is that what you use with your clients and in conversations with people who are curious and slash or, so this is like a multi-part choose what you want question. Would you consider this like your specialty or your specific lesson or message that you share? So that's a lot of weird questions all bundled up into one.
No, I actually love it. I like the pick and choose part of it. For me, the missing puzzle in the whole story was investment, right?
Okay.
And that's not something I focus on because that's something I learned through the movements. And I picked a very simple, easy way to take care of that so I don't have to think of that. It's like an automated way to invest in mutual funds. And this is not something I work on with my clients because it's typically the work of a financial advisor. Whereas a financial coach helps you actually look at your spending and helps you find that money that you then later invest. My job as a financial coach is to guide somebody to see where they can improve their finances, but it's not my job to tell you how to invest your money. That's what a financial advisor does. Or if you're, willing and interested in educating yourself, then you can do that completely DIY without a financial advisor. But it's not something that I touch on with my clients because, first of all, I'm not certified and licensed to be a financial advisor, but I also feel it's not my area of expertise. What's always come natural for me is saving and making sure, my spending is in line with what I care about. That's something I'm really good at, and it's something I feel I'm good at using out of my clients. Somebody tells me they value family time or they value travel, but then they spend their money on things that don't show that this is what they value. And I often get them that sort of a light bulb moment when I help clients discover what works for them and what matters to them. And I feel that's where I can add the most value, whereas investments and all these, that's a part that I had to discover myself and learn for myself. And that's where I feel there's other people probably that can help their clients much better with than I could. So I really start at the steps before that. to get you to a point where you have that cash flow and that money that you can put in investment. Also, there's a lot of options in the financial freedom community, how you reach that financial freedom. Some people prefer to invest in real estate. That's not a route I have chosen. So I would not, advise you for or against it, because I don't feel that that's my main area of expertise.
Just because someone might be sitting here wondering, you mentioned like you chose the simplest or the most straightforward DIY option for yourself. Do you mind sharing, is that like index funds, or is that like a 401k, or is it too much to go into on this conversation?
Well, this is again like financial advice stuff, because you can hold index funds in your 401k.
Yeah.
So there's different savings vehicles. I personally have index funds in my various savings vehicles that I then use for my income.
Great. And if a client came to you and said, I want to basically replicate exactly what you did, you would say, let's figure out what you're spending and if it's aligned with what you care about. And then you would refer them to either do their own research like you did, or to a financial advisor to figure out that recipe for themselves.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Yeah. When you talk to people about money and they see what you've done and they do think, I want to replicate this and have this for myself, do you also see any resistance showing up for people around what you described just now, as far as aligning their money with their values, or saving or budgeting or investing?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Money is such a taboo subject in our world, So, and people are always worried that you would judge them, even if you're their coach, just because your choices are different from theirs.
Right.
So, if you value, let's say, manicures, and I happen to not, and you can probably tell from my fingers that it's probably not something that's very high on my priority list, then you would think I will probably judge you for insisting that that's what you want. And then you would probably resist coaching because you're worried that I'll tell you, well, you can't have your manicure and your Starbucks and your whatever it is that you want, right?
Yeah.
But that's not my job. My job is not to tell you what you can and cannot have. My job is to guide you to figure out a way how you can have all the things you want and not judge you about what it is that you want. So, when we go through a coaching process, we focus on not what went wrong in your past and why you ended up with the debt. We figure out what works for you. Mm-hmm. And then we figure out a way how we can incorporate all the things that matter and none of the things that don't. The biggest resistance there is that misconception that a coach is there to tell you you can't have that. That's not the case.
Yeah, I think you and I even had a conversation kind of like that early on when you were kind of mentoring me a little bit. And I remember telling you something like, well, just don't make me give up my Starbucks. And you were like, you don't have to give up your Starbucks. You can have it. And I remember you had zero judgment. It was almost like encouragement even, like you should have what you want. And then I did end up giving up my Starbucks on my own just because I noticed my lifestyle changed and I didn't quote unquote need it anymore. So then I was just kind of doing it out of habit. And I was like, why am I doing this? That it is very interesting to see how it played out even in my own life.
Yeah, and and that's the question behind the question. Why do you have that? And even asking yourself that question without judging yourself,
right.
Why do I have that? And there's a million of good questions and there are a million of good reasons. And sometimes there's also a million of not so good reasons. And that's where, where the juicy part comes in. And okay, what's my reason for having that? And can I try without it? And even if I try without it for, let's say, 1 week or 1 month, I don't have to commit to going without it forever. I just try and see what does that to me. Mm-hmm. And so I see a lot of transformations in that way, where people said, but no, I got to have this. And I'm like, yeah, yes, you can. But how about you try this? I think coaching, and you probably realize that in your own coaching practice, that it's a lot more about empathy than about shame. And I think people are worried, are fearful of being shamed, but that's not what coaching is about at all. It doesn't matter what I think is the right thing. What matters is what works for you.
That's right.
Or
That's
for the
exactly
client.
how I feel about my coaching too. I don't have an agenda for you one way or the other. I don't know what's best for you. I just want to show you what you're thinking and what you're creating so you can decide. if that's what you want. So that's exactly what you do with your clients as well. What about clients who come to you and say, I don't want to budget. I am not good at budgeting. I don't want to budget. I don't know. I just don't want that.
Yes, I can understand that. And it's going to surprise you that for most of my life, I didn't have a budget. That was also because I was a natural saver. So what I would do is I would take the money I wanted to save off the top of my income, and then I would live on the rest. I felt like money was very fungible with whatever was left,
Mm-hmm.
And then even when something was left from that, I would put that into saving. And that works for people that are disciplined with their money.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain extent, I mean, I'm not saying that I would never splurge, because I totally do, because otherwise, it wouldn't be fun. I'm not a miser. So there's a way to budget without budgeting. I remember having a conversation with a guy that developed one of the, better known budgeting software products.
Yeah.
That I said, well, I don't budget because this is what I do, and I explain exactly what I just explained to you. And he's like, I totally budget. That's totally a budget, So my answer to you would be, yeah, you may not like budgeting, but maybe a way out there that doesn't feel like a budget to you, but, it still is. So there's lots of different ways to figure out where your money is going and where your money is supposed to be going, without feeling like the drudgery of like living over a budget. And I think it actually can be fun. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. At some point, we will have to look at numbers.
Yeah.
But it's not only about the numbers. And I think once people realize how fun this can be to figure out, okay, I really made sure, I have thinking funds for X, Y, and Z. So not every little hiccup in my life lead to like a major crisis, because I've like learned to set money aside for X, Y, and Z, and that then it gives me freedom and enables me to not worry about these things. Because let's face it, car repairs are a fact of car ownership. It's not something that should surprise you.
Right.
So, when looking at streamlining your finances, it can be fun, and we can take a lot of the stress out of that. Ultimately, at some point, we will have to look at the numbers, but it's not as dreadful as it sounds to most people.
Can I summarize what you just said and say you believe people can release their resistance about looking at numbers?
Yes, I believe there's a way for everybody to deal with it that works for them. There's not one size fits all, and there's different ways to try.
Totally. So it sounds like just maybe through your personality or maybe through your upbringing, you really had no resistance to saving money or managing your money. And even though maybe you had a resistance to the word budget or the maybe traditional activity of budgeting, you still did some version of that. So it sounds like maybe that's one of the reasons why you ended up being a financial coach now and helping financially single women align their spending with their values. What would you say? Is there anything that you do have resistance to if it's not saving and budgeting and managing finances?
As a financial coach, yes, it's more on the business side of things, which is really ironic because in my corporate career, I was a marketing and sales professional. So this is something that should come super natural to me. And it's something that I enjoy doing in my career. But when it comes to my coaching business, I really don't want to spend time on social media and doing any marketing or doing any of this. I mean, I do enjoy our conversation now, and that's, some way of getting the word out. But if I have to work on social media, I can agonize over which quote to put and this and that for hours, and I just don't enjoy doing that. Whereas if I get somebody and they say, how these are my numbers and can you help me look at that and can you help me work this out and I want to get out of this debt and how can I do that? I'd be like, okay, let's look at that. That's something that comes so easy. But whenever I have to kind of put the word out to social media, that's something that's really dreadful for me.
Interesting. So interesting, because there are people who would much rather spend time playing in social media than playing on a spreadsheet, right? Working on.
Well, if one of those people listens to this, they should come talk to me. They can do all my social media and I'll do all their finance stuff.
Oh, that sounds like an awesome trade. Yes. So have you explored that resistance that you have around social media?
Yes. Actually, a friend of mine has offered a quick brainstorming session on social media, and I took her up on that offer, and that made it feel a lot less stressful. I still have to go through and do some of those things. So I'm trying to work on myself for that. But, whenever I presented with the choice of sitting down and helping somebody out with their budget or their finances or some other like roadblock they have, I'd rather do that than posting pretty pictures. I know, in order to be taken seriously in the industry, I should do a lot more of that. But I'm happy with the transformation I see in my clients, and I don't have to necessarily broadcast all of that all the time, which I, don't judge anybody for doing that, because I think it's a great thing to celebrate those wins for you and for your clients.
Well, I don't know if you're seeing this too, but my mind is just going to this parallel that I see right here, that you have a resistance to the social media side of it. And one of the reasons why we're even talking about it is you have an idea that you should do it, or people in your position should do it. Whereas your clients have a resistance to, let's say, having a budget or saving money. And in their minds, they also have this idea that they should do it, or people in their position should do it. And I think it's really interesting that what you said earlier on is you, as their coach or their mentor, don't have an idea of what they should or shouldn't do. You're going to let them tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also very interesting. That's kind of how you are running your business too, is you're doing things that align with you. If you would rather spend time on the road and with your husband and enjoying this lifestyle that you've created for yourself, that's what you're going to do. So you've kind of aligned your spending of time with your values, just like you tell your clients to do with their money.
So true. So very true. And the irony is not lost on me.
So interesting. Well, on the flip side of that question, is there anything that you have zero resistance to? Like, what would you say just in your life or in your business, what comes effortlessly to you?
Spending money on causes that I care about. It's so funny. We needed new tires for our car, and whereas there's a budget for that, and we, as I said, that's like just the reality of car ownership. I shop around and make sure we get the best deal. So that's something, I work on naturally, but I still cringe that I have to hand over the credit card for that. But then, my favorite charity puts out the word that, they have a new fundraiser. And I'm like, oh, sure. Like, let's put the credit card and send them money, no problem. Rasen always chuckles like, what? Did another donation to the pet shelter or, to one of the other charities I support, and I'm like, yeah, sure. It's been 4 weeks. I mean, it's just so easy for me to support causes that I care about. Whereas if it's something for me, it's like, do I really need this? But supporting the charities that I care about, that's just, so if I have the money, sure, that means a little bit more here or there. So there's some things where it's super easy for me to spend money. In others where I, spend money, but I'm very careful in making sure I get a good deal. There's areas where I have this natural resistance, which probably explains why I am in a situation where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you shared that, because I could definitely hear your delight in your voice when you talked about what you do enjoy spending money on. And I can just imagine someone listening, maybe with some resistance, thinking like, oh, listen to this person talking about, being frugal and saving first and only spending on what you really, really care about. But then also getting to hear that you can just whip out a credit card to support a pet charity. I think that's amazing. And I think if people want to have that kind of a financial lifestyle, it's great to have you as an example that it's possible.
Oh, yes, good of you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Anything else that we should talk about or bring up?
If I have a wish, I just wish people weren't so intimidated by the idea of dealing with their money, because the options that freedom brings of, when you align your spending with your values and you make sure you're in a position to create options for yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to do what I do. Not like living in an RV and traveling the US is not everybody's cup of tea. And so I'm not, people often think I'm like trying to convince them to get into the lifestyle, which is a great lifestyle, by the way. So yes,
okay.
I acknowledge that. But if that's not your cup of tea, because some people enjoy being in their house and having their garden and being in their community constantly, and whatever it is that floats your boat, I want you to have that. And I want you to have the power to choose what it is that you like. And if you change your mind tomorrow and you want something else, I want you to have the power to do that too. Mm-hmm. And the way to do that is to, deal with your money situation head on and not feel intimidated by things that seem out of reach right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if that is in order, the rest just falls into place.
Yes, that's so helpful. I love that you put it as like a power, like people have a power by doing this, by facing it head on, and they have options. So if someone has been listening now and feels like a spark of curiosity or feels like a nudge, like this is what I've been waiting for to finally take on my finances head on, or even just start asking questions, and they want to work with you, are you accepting new clients right now, or do you have a way for people to reach out to you?
Yes, there's a scheduling part on my website that people can schedule like a 15-minute question and answer call, which is free of charge, just to see if coaching is something that would be right for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives both of us a chance to see, there's somebody I could help. There's so many different coaches out there. I think it's important if you pick one that it's somebody you vibe with,
Yes, that's great. So if you're hearing this, anyone listening and thinking, I should really talk to someone, here's your chance. You can grab Ariane's calendar and get 15 minutes and start the process. So that is amazing. Great. I just want to thank you so much for taking time away from your national park lifestyle where you're traveling the country and battling internet connectivity to get on the phone with me. I really appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness. And I'm excited for people to hear this message because it made such a difference in my life. And I am so grateful for financial independence and for budgeting and for aligning my spending with my values. And I think if other people can have that too, just like you said, it's so much freedom. So I just really want to thank you for coming and sharing your passion and your expertise. And I hope people have really enjoyed listening to your story.
Thank you so much, Bex. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my favorite subject. Thank you.
Thank you for joining Ariane and me in our conversation about financial coaching and living a lifestyle you have intentionally created for yourself. I hope you got some inspiration if this is new for you, or some confirmation and validation if you are already on board. If you want to connect with Ariane, you can search Facebook for Tidy Up Your Finances, or just go to her site at tidyupyourfinances.com. I will also have her site linked on the show notes for this episode at bexb.org/tidy. That's bexb.org/TIDY. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I cannot wait to speak with you next week. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at bexb.org to see how we can work together.